For more on the announcement and what has to happen, I want to bring in Jock Climie. He is a partner with the Emond Harden law firm in Ottawa and specializes in labor law. So, Jock, what legal considerations would federal labor lawyers have to make in implementing this policy?
Well, there's lots of things that they'll be thinking about right now, as are employers, all around the country. At Emond Harden, we represent employers, so we are primarily looking at protecting the interests of employers. Employers have obligations under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, for example. Employers have to ensure that their employees are safe in the workplace. And so what this measure really amounts to is a federal government saying, we're going to take the lead on this. We're going to say that if you are not vaccinated, you are placing your coworkers at risk. And so you have to think about privacy issues. You have to think about how you're going to get this information from employees. You have to think about how you're going to collect it, how you're going to store it, how you're going to share it internally. And probably most importantly is what happens when employees either refuse to provide you with the information or refuse to get vaccinated. And those are some of the issues that arbitrators, courts, tribunals across the country are starting to wrestle with already.
Yeah, this is all fascinating and interesting. Do you think that the law in Canada is on the side of the federal government's ability to mandate this for federal and public servants and for all those who work in federally regulated sectors?
Yeah, obviously, the coronavirus issue is novel. It's new. We've all been wrestling with it now for a year and a half or so. But the principles are not new. We've had other outbreaks, H1N1, SARS, and whatnot, polio vaccines. There's all sorts of precedents that have actually resulted in litigation and some legal principles. It's just that there are issues that pertain to this particular vaccine and this particular circumstances that we find ourselves in right now that are new. And so nobody knows what courts and arbitrators are going to do for sure. But the preponderance of the jurisprudence to date suggests that employers have the right to require their employees to tell them if they've gotten a certain vaccine or a certain immunization, and have the right to require employees to get those vaccinations. And so that is what we are advising our clients right now. However, it comes with an asterisk because, as I said, it's a bit of a brave new world.
So, and of course, there could be exemptions for medical reasons, the very few people that would not be able to get vaccinated. But could this be a fireable offense? If you were required, I don't want to make this about me, but if, I am required to come into the CBC. The CBC is a crown corporation. I can't work from home. There's not an accommodation like that. So for someone like me, or someone in more important sectors who are required to go into work where it's not always possible to physically distance, to refuse to get vaccinated, could the employer say, you're fired?
Yeah, so I can tell you that at Emond Harden, my law firm where I work, and we advise employers across the province, we are not recommending that employers discipline employees for either refusing to share their vaccination status or for refusing to get vaccinated. Rather, we are recommending different measures be imposed. So, for example, you might have to take a leave without pay. You might not be permitted in the workplace until you have disclosed or until you have vaccinated. We are suggesting that if you need them at work, then perhaps they have to continue to follow certain safety protocols, wear PPE. If there's an outbreak, they have to go home without access to paid sick leave. There are other ways to try and win the hearts and minds, if you will, of employees to get them to do what I think the majority believe is the right thing to do. But to discipline or to fire at this point is taking a risk. We would suggest an unnecessary risk, given that we don't know what courts would do with such a case, and frankly, you don't have to fire somebody in order to ensure that you get what you need from your employees with respect to vaccinations.
What do you make of some of the language that the federal government is going to require it for federal employees, and they have they expect it from federally regulated sectors. Do you look at those words and say, is there a little bit of a nuance there, that it's required for the 300,000 public sector workers, and there's an expectation that it will also apply to the 900,000 others who work in federally regulated sectors like the telecommunications and banks?
Yeah, so our firm represents many different federal departments and organizations, and so we're well aware of these nuances. And the reality is that the federal government only has so much legal control over federally regulated employees. And there are many different types of federally regulated employees. So I think what you've heard now from the federal government is, where we have the right to dictate terms and conditions of employment through policy, we're going to do it. Where we don't have that power, we're going to strongly recommend it. And how they go about leveraging that remains to be seen. But I think what is really important about this latest announcement is, as I think the former quote mentioned, it's about leadership. It's about the federal government saying, we are going to say this is mandatory for us. And now for employers, the sorts of employers that we advise every day, when they see the federal government taking this stance, it makes it far more likely that they will have the confidence to impose similar measures in their own workplaces.
Let's talk about, travelers, because that also would be included in this. It would seem, if you want to take a train from Toronto to Montreal, or if you want to take a plane from Vancouver to Calgary, it would seem you are going to have to be mandated to be fully vaccinated. How sound do you think the federal government's role is there in mandating that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's important to understand the context that organizations have both employees and many have customers. They provide a service. And so when you're going to start mandating these or implementing these sorts of policies, there's the policies that apply to your employees, and there's the policies that apply to those who avail themselves of your services. And so now you've moved into the service side of things. And the legal principles are often the same. However, there are some distinctions. I think where we will most likely see the challenges is in the service area. And you mentioned earlier about those who could state a need for accommodation. And I think that's where we're going to see that more and more. There's no question that there are some individuals who we know are getting notes from their doctors saying for medical reasons they should not get vaccinated. There is lots of talk about the possibility of people saying they don't want to be vaccinated on religious grounds. I have yet to hear of that actually in point of fact occurring, but everybody is alive to the possibility. And so when you start talking about a Via Rail or an airline saying you can't come on unless, that's no different than a store saying you can't come in unless. And then we have to talk about, again, collection of information. How do we know if you're vaccinated? Who's going to require that proof? What type of proof is going to be required? What are you going to do with that information once you have collected it? Lots of questions, but I think you're going to see more and more of this. And as I said, the federal government's move in this regard is going to give a lot of businesses the confidence that they can start requiring this when they offer their services to the public.
So that was my last question to you, Jock, that, while the federal government is doing this for its employees and federally regulated sectors, do you think that this will have a domino effect at the provincial level, at the municipal level, in other private sector areas that are not controlled or not regulated by the federal government?
I do, and I think that's exactly what Justin Trudeau's government is very well aware of. They know that if they come out and they're not quibbling, they're not hesitating, they're just saying this is going to be mandatory, you're going to see other levels of government and other businesses taking the same stance. Look, we are advising on these issues every day, and we are having to tell our clients, we don't know. We don't know what courts and tribunals are going to do with this. But now you can say, well, we know the federal government's doing this. And so if a court's going to say that you, ABC Inc., can't do this, well, they're also going to be saying it to one of the largest employers in this country. And so that's going to give everybody a lot of confidence that that they can start implementing these policies. And it depends, and it's a philosophical approach too. And that's what you've been talking about, I know, on your broadcasts, about how there are different philosophies out there. And you mentioned the Conservatives might have a different philosophy, or individuals, anti-vaxxers, might have a different philosophy. This is about an employer taking its philosophical beliefs and imposing it in a legal framework.
Well, let me ask you, we talk about how there may be some concerns about litigation coming from people who saying, you can't tell me that I have to have a vaccination. But what about the people that are choosing to be vaccinated who might feel as though they are in an unsafe workplace because the employer is choosing not to require a vaccination? Couldn't that be open to some kind of litigation?
Absolutely. The unfortunate reality for employers is that they are between rocks and hard places all around them. There are many possible legal challenges from many different angles, and that's why it's important to get legal advice on some of these issues, because, again, the Occupational Health and Safety Act is an obligation that's imposed, for example, in Ontario on all employers. If an employee says, well, wait a second, I can't get the vaccine because I have a medical condition, you're allowing my coworker who's working right beside me to come to work without a vaccination, that's a problem. And so now it imposes a different obligation on that employer to think about this in a different way.
Jock, really good to talk to you. Thank you. That is labor lawyer Jock Climie in Ottawa.